call the meeting to order. It is 7:02 for the Colchester Planning Commission. So the first thing we got is consideration reserved for changes to agenda items in order. We will not be making any changes. These are comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. All good there? All good there? Okay. So right now we're going into a discussion on the state legislation related to planning and required future amendments for local land development regulations. Take it away, Kathy.
Just real quick before I turn it over to Zach, just as a reminder, this was on our agenda last month, but we were pretty late with some other items, so we decided to kick it off to this month. So here we are with fresher brains. So I'm going to let Zach just talk to you, and I'll pipe in here and there. But
all right. Yeah, so revisiting this one from the last meeting, we didn't really get into it, but this was in your packet, so the memo that was provided to you is pretty much the exact same. So we'll kind of just walk through some of these items. So similar to last year, the legislature passed, well, in 2023, they passed the HOME Act, which required the Planning Commission to update the regulations to come into compliance with some of those required elements. This year, they passed Act 181, which instills some additional changes that will need to be made as part of the next update to the regulations. So really want to just walk through what those changes are and where those changes will end up. There's no text to really review tonight, but really just to update you on what the new requirements are and how that may or may not affect the regulations. So starting off with 24 VSA 4412, this section styled required provisions and prohibited effects. There's a couple changes in this section. Most notable, the legislature further defined the equal treatment of single unit dwellings and duplex dwellings. So they require now that duplexes shall be in allowed use with dimensional standards that are not more restrictive than is required for a single unit dwelling, including no additional land or lot area than would be required for a single unit dwelling. I should note real quick that the effective date for a lot of these changes has already passed, so these changes are in effect technically. So right now we're kind of in a gray area, kind of a middle state where the regulations might say one thing, but we have to interpret them in accordance with state law. So for this one, the real change was including no additional land or lot area than would be required for a single unit dwelling. So really this is allowing now for duplexes to be permitted in the exact same place, exact same lots as single unit dwellings, which is a change to how that's been interpreted in the development regulations in the past. Generally, you've required additional density for duplexes. Any questions on that item right off?
Just the septic capacity, so whatever the septic lines are in terms of if they don't have the capacity to support, let's say, 2 or 3 duplexes when you are planning for single homes, does that make it so that they can't build a duplex?
Yeah, so that's part of it. So in Article 11, we do require that all dwellings are connected to permitted wastewater systems, and if the permitted wastewater system is for single unit dwelling, there might be a situation where that might be suitable for a duplex, but they'd likely want to work with an engineer or otherwise investigate the capacity of that system to make sure that it is adequate in compliance with the state wastewater regulations. So there is still, we're still looking at that in the office.
So you could deny an application if we didn't have capacity, if you could show data that we don't have capacity to support this duplex, like a 5-unit duplex.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
so just to clarify, we wouldn't be the ones showing that we don't have capacity. What would be more likely to happen is if somebody had a single-family home, either existing or it was a lot that was pre-approved, and they have a permit for, say, 3 bedrooms to go with that. and they came in and they wanted each side of that duplex to have 2 bedrooms for a total of 4, we would say, you need to prove to us that you have a permit from the state. All permits are now coming through the state for those 4 bedrooms, total of 4. In some cases, some unique cases, the actual units matter as well as bedrooms. That's less common, but not unheard of in certain subdivisions based on how they permit their wastewater. But in most cases, they just have to show us the bedroom. So sometimes what we've seen, and something that we've seen, I think as recently as this week, it may be that they'd been permitted for 3 bedrooms and their duplex is not a change. They're showing 2 on one side and 1 on the other side. And so in most of those cases, the state has said no new permit is needed. 3 bedrooms is 3 bedrooms to them, whether they exist in 1 unit or 2. So we've just asked them to verify that to us. So from a wastewater perspective, that's what we're seeing. Really what they're demonstrating at this point is that they have that wastewater and they're paying a certain amount in fees for those new units. We do have impact fees. We've seen, how many do you think have we seen take advantage of this so far?
It's under 10 thus far, for sure, but it's definitely, a few have come in at this point.
Thank you.
Well, if they don't have capacity with their original design, they could step in to find out if they can build a new septic system for the new property, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think mostly what we're seeing are people who would have maybe looked at ADUs, but they don't want to live on site, or they don't like that 30% restriction. They were already looking at maybe 2 units on a property, or they had an ADU that they now are converting to a second unit. So, I think we'll see more as people learn about it. I don't think it's widely known. I'm actually surprised we've seen as many as we have.
Okay.
So far, mostly they've been conversions of single structures, but I think a few have been second structures.
All right, any other questions on that? That is definitely one of the larger discussion points of this, this memo, so.
Yeah, and I'll just share real quick. When we were talking about this in the planning field with the legislature, our big concern, which I haven't seen come to fruition, and I hope I never do, but our big concern from a theoretical perspective with this regulation was, just making sure that, it's one thing to have a single unit turn into 2. It's another if you have a 30-unit subdivision with 30 lots turn into 60. Because the impacts of that were probably not planned. When you are talking about 30 new cars, 30 new school students, 30 new whatever else, or 60 units turning into 120. And maybe that being a loophole. So that was the concern, if there was ever any opposition to this in advance of the legislation passing, but we haven't seen that, and hopefully we don't.
So this would affect all the residential districts that we have?
It is statewide, and it is in all districts, whether they are served by water or sewer. Zach will share with you that there is another layer of this that affects areas served by water, public, municipal water and sewer. This is the first layer in any area, whether served by water or sewer. So yes, all districts. If residential is allowed, year-round residential is allowed. So you can't now have residential in an area where residential is not allowed. That doesn't change.
It's still set up for homeowner occupied, though? You have to be, no?
No.
So it could be straight rental?
Yes, both units could be rental.
Okay. Unless it's not zoned for it.
We don't zone for rental or
Okay.
not rental, so.
All right.
But yes, if it was not zoned for residential at all, then it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
And we do have some of those zones.
So do they, without reading all the regulations, do they have a thing where they can't have it be like an Airbnb?
We do have a definition of something that would start to qualify it. But no, we don't have
You don't, but
anything.
the state doesn't either? I mean, they're saying you can take a single-family house and have a duplex. You know, someone could develop it and just operate it as a transient rental.
Mhm.
It's a problem we'll have to adjust in the future.
Yeah, I
Every
think
other
so.
state has already had major problems. So,
I mean, I don't have anything against Airbnb.
I don't
If
either,
they take
but,
over,
yeah.
it's a different story.
but other states, especially tourist states, Arizona, Utah, all those areas, they're right now doing new regulations just for that. Whole neighborhoods get destroyed, or changed, I should say.
And I
Should say
think
destroyed.
that the ones that we've seen so far have not been in what I would put in that category. I think they've been in areas where, like, I haven't seen known rentals turn into 2 rentals, at least not yet. I think the ones, is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, like Kathy Ann was saying earlier, what we've seen is really folks that probably would have applied for an accessory dwelling unit and rented either the primary home or the accessory dwelling unit. It's pretty much that sort of scale is what we've seen thus far. And in that situation, you're looking at a rental of at least one part of the building, probably. In this case, it's maybe a rental of both parts of the building, maybe. So,
What may prevent that from happening in some areas where we know there are some short-term rentals is a parking requirement, maybe? But so far, it hasn't been, I don't know. So far. Ask me again in 6 months, we'll do a check-in.
Mhm. It just seems like a loophole in the regulations, the
Yeah.
state regulations. They want to provide permanent housing. If a developer could come and take that housing away. Instead of one single family, instead of 2, now there's none. Okay.
all right. Moving on a bit. So this next section here, there's a lot of, planning language being thrown around, so I'm going to summarize it as all of this applies to areas served by municipal water and sewer, which last year we had talked about. That phrase has a very specific definition, and there's certain areas that meet that definition in Colchester and certain areas that do not. Generally, our understanding last year was that it's really the General Development 3 district, which is the Severance Corners district, that meets that definition. There are other areas in town served by municipal water and sewer, but they might serve a mobile home park, for example, or that sewer service area was created to address a health hazard, for example. Or there's capacity limitations, thinking about the Fork, for example. So there's some areas that likely don't meet that definition in Colchester. Now, one thing we are going to do is check our understanding of that and make sure we're staying up to date and that that's still our understanding going forward. So that's a little bit of homework for staff there. But starting off, so first item here is requiring multi-unit dwellings, or allowing multi-unit dwellings with 4 or fewer units be permitted uses on the same size lot as a single-unit dwelling. Again, any district served by municipal sewer and water. Second one's establishing lot and building dimensional standards that allow 5 or more dwellings per acre for each allowed residential use. Again, not more restrictive than single-unit dwellings. And also allowing affordable housing developments, which, like we talked about before, kind of have a bonus for density to round up when it results in a fraction. Now, in the General Development 3 district, generally, we're not looking at density requirements there. Really that's focused on higher density development. So that area, there's not really, staff's not foreseeing many changes required to conform with this at this time. We're of course going to look more into that and make sure our understanding's all squared away there, but it's not flagged as an area that's going to need significant work at this time. Any questions on that part?
So areas served by municipal water and sewer. It's not just the GD3, is it? I mean, Lake Shore, 1, 2, 3, and 4 now will have sewer. They already have water.
Yeah, so, do you want to answer it? Sorry.
No, I was just, like I had said before, there's a definition, and we can pull that up for you at either now or, maybe at a later
Okay.
time. There are areas that, may have water and sewer, but are excluded from that definition and statute, because, for example, that area,
Okay.
was really, my understanding at least, is that it was implemented to address health concerns of pollution to the lake, was not permitted for, really a growth area in town.
Yeah, there is, so the definition of area served by municipal water and sewer came in last year's, in 2023's legislation. And our interpretation, our understanding of that definition at that time was that the bay would be excluded from that, for at least, I think, under two of the provisions. One being because of the purpose of it, and the other being the limited capacity. Anybody who's been following along might know that there's only a certain number of gallons that have been allocated, and there's no additional, or very limited additional. And so that means that area is not served by water and sewer. The definition of that has continued to be discussed at the legislature. I don't believe they made a change in 2024. I don't know if they will going forward, because it has been hotly discussed. No shortage of communities have been finding their ways around that. One that I know of has just made a map and said, here's our area served by water and sewer. And seemingly are getting away with that. So that seems to be working. Well, I won't get into my soapbox on that one, but so there is a definition. We will be sitting down very soon, as Zach has mentioned, to just double check, our confidence level there. There's a lot of weird cases throughout Colchester. The Bay is the first one that comes to mind for most people, because we are running new sewer. There is a few others where there is municipal sewer, but it's very limited to the mobile home parks. There's a line. There's a few neighborhoods that have a very discrete connection. Zach mentioned the fort, but that has extreme limitations as well. So we'll be going through that, and we'll be doing that in coordination with DPW to make sure that we're utilizing their knowledge as well. But it's our belief at this time that the only area that's truly served by municipal sewer and water is really the GD3 Growth Center area. And so the impact of now allowing or requiring the allowance of these additional units, and as you can see there, it's 4+ units anywhere a single is allowed, would be minimized, because we don't have a density cap in that area. So that's our understanding, but if that changes, we will definitely let you know. Or if the legislation changes, we'll let you know that too.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that, since we just kind of talked through the different areas in town, is that Exit 16 also comes to mind. A part of that definition is that year-round residential use needs to be permitted in that district. So because of the uses that are permitted in Exit 16, really more of a commercial district, that doesn't fall under this definition, even though there is capacity in that district for additional growth. It's just the town has defined that as commercial growth. So just something to keep in mind as we kind of walk through some other items as well.
True. So if you were to, for instance, you've been asked several times to permit residential allowances in that area. If you were, to allow residential, you would have to allow at least 4 units to a lot, if you were to, in that exit 16 area, because you'd then be subject to that requirement. So Rita had a question.
Just thinking, just asking, but if we wanted to take the empty office space, could we limit it to just converting the empty office spaces into residential? Could we limit it that way? So it wouldn't mean that there would be, duplexes or single family, but change it to a mixed use or something? I'm just asking, I'm not like, just asking.
I'd have to think on that and get
Okay.
back to you. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
If it's okay with the chair.
Sure.
I think it would require careful crafting.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So just to finish out this section, there was a new item added as well to clarify that no bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting unrelated occupants from residing in the same dwelling unit. You didn't do that before. We fixed the language as well, so there's no single family dwelling, it's single unit dwelling. Same thing with multifamily, multi-unit. So that's already been addressed in the previous supplement. No action needed now. You can pat yourselves on the back, keep scrolling. But there are some recommended actions here. So, Article 1, 1.07, applicability of regulations, probably needs to be modified, as well as 2.04. And that's really just to kind of clarify the discussion around how the density calculation will still be used, but how it is not used for single unit dwellings and duplexes. So minor language there that you'll probably see in a future red line. So moving on to 24 VSA 4413. This is really a section that limits the extent to which a town can regulate certain uses. Really there's a list here only with respect to location, size, height, building bulk, yards, courts, setbacks, density of buildings. I won't read the whole list. Generally, you're going to see items like religious uses here. Really uses that you're allowed to regulate, but can't have the effect of interfering with the intended functional use. An item was added to this list, quote, hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments. So, there's no recommendations provided here right now, but really this is going to be an exercise of looking through the table of uses, table A2, and really better understanding, first of all, where hotels and motels are permitted and where permanently affordable housing developments could be permitted, and seeing where those overlap and where they don't overlap. Because where they don't, you're going to need to identify areas where the use, quote, hotels and motels converted to permanently affordable housing developments could be permissible. So it's definitely something to, think forward here about where the hotels and motels in town are, and how those, could be converted in the future, subject to site plan review, likely. Any questions about that section?
So is this a zoning regulation that, I don't understand how this can be implemented, honestly. When I read that, I was like, well, we're not going to take a motel that we have in a commercial district and change it into housing. That wasn't our goal for the motel to begin with. So is there a regulation that the state put on us that says, yes, you are, and this is how you have to do it? And if we don't pick one, what happens? If we don't come up with the answer to this,
So,
what's the next thing?
so it's not saying that you have to do it. What it's saying is that you have to allow it to happen. If a private or nonprofit were to say, hey, we're going to convert Hotel X into, and this is happening, you've seen it happen in some other communities. It's happened in Colchester too, right? No? Maybe I can't. Maybe not in Colchester.
No, I don't believe so.
But I could probably name you a few in some other communities. Closest one I can think of maybe is in Essex on Susie Wilson. There used to be a hotel across from the bagel place. Shelburne Road, there's quite a few,
Right.
Wilson Road, hotels that are now affordable housing. So if that were to happen through a private or nonprofit, this legislation says you can't use zoning to stop it. So you don't have to do it, the town doesn't have to do it, the town doesn't have to fund it. The town just cannot say no.
What zoning do they go under then? A
So
residential zoning? They pick,
So what we're saying is that the new zoning, you would create a new zoning or a new use, because we don't have a use. We wouldn't call it residential because it's not.
right.
Because the allowances afforded to it are unique. And it's a mouthful, but I think it is a necessary mouthful. As Zach has written here, it would very likely be called hotels and motels converted to a permanently affordable housing.
Now, did they provide the rules, restrictions, the zonings, whatever, that goes along with this? And this is something we have to make up, or we just put that line in it and say, sure, you want to build this or turn this building into this?
So what this regulation is saying is that the only regulation, the only restrictions that you are allowed to place on it are respect to those things cited here. Location, size, height, building bulk, most of which you probably would not be able to enforce because the building's already there. So it's not like you can take issue with its height.
Right.
Or most of these things. You might be able to address parking, but, so you probably could assign a parking to it, but it's probably not gonna vary that much from a hotel use.
So the only thing that would regulate it again would be wastewater capacity and how many people you can put into the building.
Yeah, and wastewater is somewhat nebulous because it doesn't specifically list it, so we'd have to probably run that through our attorney, because it's not specifically listed. You probably could. I imagine you could.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, yeah.
How many units can go in, and who determines the capacity for the units in the existing structures?
Good question.
It's a good question.
Probably would be end up determined by wastewater. What's also not clear here is that the conversion is exempt under this regulation, but it doesn't speak at all. It doesn't fathom any sort of expansion, so that is unclear. I don't think it contemplates any expansion of that. And that's not been tested. So what you see is what we know.
This is for existing buildings? No, or is it for an
Existing.
area that's zoned for a motel and it's decided,
No.
or somebody wants to come in and build an affordable housing?
As written, it says converted, so it is an existing hotel and motel that's converted.
Hmm.
So I think it would have to be an operable hotel motel that would then be converted.
Okay.
You sounded specific when you said like the nonprofit within it. That's not necessarily any restriction.
No, I only say that just because that's what we see.
Yeah.
It's just common.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, it wouldn't stop a community from doing it or somebody else. You don't usually see a for-profit developer create affordable housing all on their own. Not sure there's a profit to be made in it.
Yeah, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
So, if these hotel units had like little kitchenettes and, could they just convert to, that people would just either buy it and that's their housing?
It has to be permanently affordable, so my guess is we would be well within the provisions of this law to require them to demonstrate that it's permanently affordable.
Yeah.
Probably either by working through a partner or having the correct paperwork, deeds in place. But it does have to be permanently affordable, and they would have to demonstrate that to the municipality's satisfaction.
But it could be like apartments. It doesn't have, when you
Yeah.
say housing, it needs
Yeah, I
a
would
place
imagine that it has to be
like
an apartment.
Okay.
I can't imagine that anything short of that is a housing unit.
Mhm.
Still a hotel at that point if it doesn't have a kitchen, I would think. So,
Okay.
Yeah, you were thinking they were going to buy it like a condo? Is that what your thoughts was?
You know, just, well, if it's affordable, you know, I don't know, again, what the kind of criteria is. What is that for affordable? But let's say you had a hotel that, you know, had a kitchenette and, you know, would you have to do any conversion other than, it's not people coming in every 3 days, it's just someone buys it as an apartment and it's, they, you know, own that property. I know there's a lot of legal stuff that needs to happen
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
of doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't either,
Yeah.
but I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, when you say housing, I'm thinking, do they tear down the building and have to build housing, or can the?
yeah, I think if you were to just Google, I think any of the number of ones that have happened in already, I think that what they've done in most of them, I think they've had to add, most of them are not already fully self-sufficient, they're not efficiencies, they've had to go in and add kitchen facilities and
Mhm.
stuff, you know, Williston Road in South Burlington, I think it was like the Ho Hum Motel, and then I think there's at least 2 or 3 examples on Shelburne Road. Harborview, is that the name of one of them? I think
Mhm.
there was also a Ho Hum on Williston Road, I think maybe that was the name of one of them. The Ethan Allen Motel, I think, has recently become permanently affordable. And there's been news articles written about them, and I think they talked to you about, I think it says in there what they've done.
Mhm.
On the Act 250 database.
Act 250? Oh, I guess that, yeah, that's true.
Permanent directive.
And then Susie Wilson Road, that used to be a hotel across from, I think it was like Handy Suites? Is that what it was called once upon a time?
Handy's developed it originally.
Andy's Place, it used to be called.
Is that what it's called,
I
Handy's
think
Place?
yeah.
It's kind of across from the Burlington Bagel.
Mhm.
So that was a hotel that was converted to, I believe it's a Champlain Housing Trust building. I'm sure those didn't all have efficient, like, so that was converted.
Mhm.
This, I think, is trying to make sure that can happen anywhere they want it to happen.
Mhm.
But as Sarah said, it's not tearing them down, it's converting an existing building.
It's converting. I don't think that this would allow them to tear it down.
Okay.
But I'm sure that's a Supreme Court case waiting to happen someday.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know if Zach got to the part where he says what you have to do. There's a recommended action there.
You know, that housing.
All right.
Can you go past that one?
Yeah, we can go past that one. All right, so new section of statute, a fun new section of statute. Normally, you know, a lot of these statutory items say like, hey, you know, these are some limitations on municipal bylaws. It's sort of an enabling statute, right? Like you can, here's some guardrails. This new section is 4428, parking bylaws. So it's very regulatory in its nature. Establishes that a municipality may regulate parking. Congrats, we do. So nothing new needed there. Establishes a uniform maximum parking space size of 9 feet by 18 feet for the purpose of residential parking, except for ADA spaces. We'll get into this one in a minute. Also allows for non-conforming parking spaces to count for the parking requirement of a residential building, and allows for off-site shared parking via a legal agreement. So, like I said before, you know, kind of going through this list here, we already regulate parking. It's under 10.01, very common development review section for us to get into. We do allow for off-site parking through a shared legal agreement. See it happen every once in a while. So it's already in there, no changes needed. So really, speaking on first this required parking space size for residential parking areas. Right now, the parking space size in Colchester for 90-degree, parking layout, that's in Appendix B. It's, a parking space size that measures 9 feet wide by 20 feet deep. So this kind of does require some sort of change here. And you have some options to, look into reducing that for strictly residential projects. Maybe creating a uniform across town 9-foot by 18-foot parking space just so everyone's parking lots work the same. That's an option for you. Again, not trying to prescribe this here. Thank you, Kathy, for bringing it up. So this is sort of what, all developments are reviewed against here. There are a couple other layouts, though, and Kathy has, brought it up actually before this was even adopted by the legislature. She tried her best. The 18-foot depth does pose some issues when you get into the 60-degree layout, as well as, I believe it's a 45-degree layout further down there.
Oh, yeah.
45-degree, and also parallel layout, just in terms of getting the car in the space. So, probably not looking at trying to change those other items, but again, there's going to need to be some updates here to comply with this regulation. So I do want to pause there for a moment.
I'm just wondering how they came up with that number for a maximum.
It was even smaller to start with. And planner ilk like me stomped our feet and got it to at least be this one. I don't know. I don't know where it... So I think the intention was good of trying to say, but none of us have ever figured out what town, who's the problem town? Is somebody out there requiring 30-foot parking spaces and it needed to be saved? Nobody's figured this out.
But usually it's a minimum, that's size for a parking
Yeah.
space. So it's- yeah.
So it seems to be a solution that was in search of a problem. We don't know where the problem was. The problem with the solution is that there's this envisioning that all parking spaces exist in a 90-degree layout. And 9 by 18 is not a terrible size. It's not. A little tight for some large pickup trucks, but okay. We'll all stop driving very large pickup trucks. Or they'll park over the space. But it becomes a real problem if you have a layout that is not 90 degrees. You cannot parallel park in an 18-foot space. Not even a small car. I drive a small car. And an 18-foot space is really tight. And there's a reason that we have parking spaces that start to get a little bit larger. So, as Zach said, we have a couple options to comply with legislation. We can, and this is just residential. For some reason, this only applies to residential. We can drop all of our layouts other than 90 degrees. And then it's not too hard to comply, and the long pickup trucks will just have to hang over the curbs. We can, interestingly enough, they don't talk about the aisle widths. We could require a 40-foot aisle if we want, and then everybody fits. No problem there. Talk about a loophole. We could ignore the legislation altogether. Probably not the best choice, especially on record. Just giving you options. Am I missing an option?
Oh, there was an option provided by the state.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, it was to
can we
stop
do?
regulating parking.
We could stop
I don't know if you
regulating.
want to do that, but that was
All
the
parking.
solution that I saw in writing. So
Yeah.
It's a free-for-all.
So, I don't love these. I would say that I could be hopeful that the next session fixes this, but at least 10 of us testified multiple times as to the problems with this, and it didn't go anywhere, so
Do we
think
regulate
we're stuck
the
with this.
aisleway now?
Do we
Do we
reg,
regulate the little
This-
aisleway now?
what you're seeing now is the current regulation.
So I see a number for the aisleway,
You see a
That-
number for the aisleway, yes.
so we're regulating that.
So we
could
require,
We could expand that 2 feet or 4 feet or whatever.
We could.
want. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to clarify as well, there is a section under, this, not even in the development regulations in Chapter 7, for any building that requires a ladder truck. There's a 24-foot aisle width requirement in Chapter 4, so that says 20 feet minimum. You're looking maybe like a single-story structure there. More than one story, generally the fire department's going to require that to be 24. So that's a pretty common
True.
width that you'll see around town.
This requirement's just for residential, so it'd be kind of, the big buildings we have in the GD3 right now, this would have an impact about their parking.
I mean, the only place it's really going to have an impact, truly have an impact, is anybody who wants to do one-way circulation or anything that's not a 90-degree space. I think it's fairly easy to meet the 9 by 18 space in two-way circulation with a 90-degree. Like, we're meeting the state law here. This layout meets the state law, which is mostly what we see. We do see it. But there are cases, and I think we're especially going to see it in our GD3 form-based code area, where single lane circulation, this shows two, but I think you get one ways when people don't have a lot of space. When they want a little bit of parking in front of a building, or it's a narrow, but hey, we might as well use what we have. And to say that that space can only be 18 feet is limiting. So, I mean, they could voluntarily make it larger. We just can't require it to be larger. And the same thing with parallel parking. So anybody who wants to utilize parallel parking, we cannot require them to have 20 feet for parallel parking. They could do it on their own. We just
Doesn't
can't
mean they can
require
do
it.
on their
They
own.
could propose 20 feet. We are just not allowed to set the minimum at more than 18. So if somebody came in and wanted a 24-foot parallel space, they could do that.
Yeah, but this says maximum of 9 by 18.
That's the maximum that we can require.
That's confusing.
The maximum minimum, it is very confusing.
Because it's saying maximum, that's the most you can allow.
Most we could require, I believe, is the way it's written, right? They were trying to put limitations on what a municipality can require.
Yeah, the maximum that we could require is 18 feet. The regulations currently say 20-foot minimum. So by having a 20-foot minimum, we are above the 18-foot maximum.
I know, there's a lot of M's.
But we could promote a 20-foot parking space.
But the maximum minimum is 18. I know it seems like a small
That's not how it
thing.
reads, but okay.
I don't think it's a small thing. I've been trapped before with my truck and not be able to get it somewhere.
You got a
It's
big
not a small thing. It is. I
But
agree.
it is one area where I'm just struggling to figure out how we comply in a way that is just practical. So this one, I think is going to require you, not necessarily tonight, we can come back, but I think it's going to require you to give us some direction on how to comply. Do we,
Take a section of non-conforming parking spaces.
yeah, not conforming, but we can't require,
Can you require a buffer zone between every parallel parking? 2 feet?
Might be more than that.
maybe more than that.
Well, 20 feet, I mean, I can park in the 20-foot one, but 18.
Oh, we kind of show something here, don't we? What is this?
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's on display in the town lot.
No. You only need about 6.
Oh, yes, we do have those buffers.
Mhm.
And if you look out back there, you can't, it's dark. But we do utilize a
Yeah,
little,
up front too, you have the buffers.
and out front too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It doesn't say we can't require those.
There you go.
So,
Because I think
yeah,
they work out front, I've, parked there.
you parked in the parallel
I
spaces out front.
sometimes do, I didn't tonight, but
Yeah,
it does make a difference to have that buffer zone.
yeah. Yeah, we have a tiny, the town car is a tiny little Nissan Leaf. And when we're bringing it in between the two trucks that are parked at either side, I appreciate the little buffers. And that's probably in a 20-foot space. Maybe?
I think so. I don't know. But one thing just to mention here is the other part of this section does require that the town allow for the for non-conforming parking spaces to count for the parking requirement of a residential building. There are parking lots that exist around town, plenty of them, that have 18-foot long parking spaces. So it's worth recognizing that in the regulations, just because I don't think it's anyone's intent to want to make people put down more pavement if pavement's already striped and there working. So
Yeah, that's
likely going to see some language there as well. All right.
So you don't have to solve it tonight, but we do want to point it out. We'll come back. We'll look into buffer zones. We'll look into whatever else we can look into.
Is there any conversation about putting in EV chargers in any of these parking, like requiring EV chargers to be put in?
So I don't know what, so as part of the stretch energy code updates, and I don't know what act those were part of off the top of my head. So those are largely dealt with as part of the energy code standards, which are enforced at the state level, because they apply for multi-unit housing or for anything that's subject to state codes. So there are requirements, they vary, I'm not an expert in them. There's everything from EV ready to EV, what's the other word? It's not EV ready, there's another one. EV accessible. And then there's actual EV enabled. There's 3 different tiers, I think. So it is happening at the state level, where there are requirements, even right down to a duplex style unit, where there are requirements for how you're laying your power lines, how you're formatting your parking, and then multifamily. And those do translate over. We don't have to put them into our regulations because they are in the state regulations. So multi-unit buildings do have requirements to have either dedicated stations or to have the dedicated outlets so that when it's ready. And it goes beyond just EV. I think it's also solar readiness and other energy readiness, depending on, it's really complicated, but somebody smarter than me.
I just think most people will want to be charging at
Yeah.
night when they come home.
So
I'm just assuming, so.
So the state's taking care of that in a different place in the regulations.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Did you have something to add to that?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Other than that, the way that those regulations are written, I don't think you would want to regulate or have me regulating anything to that extent. Like, do they have a 50 amp breaker? Do they have conduit within 3 feet of the car? That's a little.
Spend
far
5
for us.
minutes with it and you'll be glad we're not, because it's really complicated.
No, I've heard, cousin lives in Burlington, they bought their parents' house and they got it with some renovations. It was required by Burlington that they have the EV chargers put in, or they wouldn't have given them.
Oh. The language is complicated.
Yeah.
And I have 2 chargers at my house, and I find it very complicated.
Well, yeah.
All right. So moving down the list here, kind of getting away from the larger discussion points, and hopefully we'll move quickly here. Under 4414, there was another clarification about that the number of parking spaces shall be rounded up to the nearest whole number. This is consistent with the language in the development regulations, and it doesn't need an update. So you're all good there. 4464, hearing and notice requirements. So this section was modified to include a new deadline for the appropriate municipal planner in Colchester, that's the Development Review Board, to notice and warn a hearing on an application within 120 days of an application being deemed complete. So sort of a new timeline here. Right now, like I've written here, most applications that come before the DRB, they're deemed complete, scheduled for a hearing within 35 to 75 or 70 days. So this timeline, you know, really doesn't present any concerns. You already have a statutory reference here, but maybe that language can be just modified to slightly reflect that there's a timeline associated with it. Really no concerns here from staff. Are there any questions about this section?
So I'll just share super quick because I don't want you guys to think that I'm just here complaining about legislation all the time. The original draft of this was much shorter than 120 days. And when the planner folks spoke up, we were listened to. And we're very grateful for this timeline, I think. Everybody's very grateful that this was much better than the first draft, which was something like 45 days. And that was to like a decision. So.
Yeah, so it was issuing a decision.
It was really scary.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
timeline to issue a decision was a bit concerning at the time. So we were glad to see that this is more reasonable for us for sure.
Was this GovOps, were you in, or transportation?
No, this one started, I don't know, this might have been, it was either in economic development or Senate resources, I can't remember. There were two or three bills that came together eventually, and I can't remember which one this started in, but we were listened to,
Okay, good.
definitely listened to on this point.
All right. Moving on down to 4465, appeals of decisions of the administrative officer. Me. So the the definition of interested person was modified to increase the number of people signing a petition from 10 to 20. No real big changes needed here. We've already got the statutory reference for how appeals are dealt with in the regulations, so there's really not any changes that need to be made. We'll clarify for sure, but you know it seems pretty straightforward, and best to kind of keep the state statutory stuff in statute because that's where we'll go to make sure we're up to date. So those are really all of the items that I wanted to kind of brief you all on. Of course, looking forward, we'll bring some red line text and of course do some of the research we've promised. But really wanted to provide this time for you guys to first, see these items so you can kind of provide us some initial feelings, get a pulse check on some of them, and you'll know what to expect from us going forward.
It's perfect. Yep, good job. Everybody okay with all that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Parking's still confusing to me.
Heads up is good, very good.
We were trying not to hit you too quickly because
Yeah.
we know that the last supplement was a quick turnaround. I don't think there's anything in here. I mean, obviously, we don't want this to linger too long, but I think it can go slow enough that there might be some other things we incorporate with it. So
Yeah.
we'll feel it out as we go, check in with you. We won't get to P or W or whatever in the list of updates, but it'll probably be more than C or D.
Perfect. All right, we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we have a request for supplement amendment to the Colchester Development Regulations. The request is from Don Weston to allow mini storage
All right, lost our agenda.
in a GD4 zoning district.
Okay, we did put a table up if you guys want to.
Do we have to sit down?
You do not, but you do have to state your name. Thank you.
Can I move this forward a little bit?
Sure,
Okay,
if you're more comfortable.
that'd be great. When's the VP debate take place?
Oh, I'm
9
not
o'clock.
sure, but if you need us to get you out of here so you can catch it, well,
Okay.
the speed is up to you.
This is Don Weston, and Don is the key guy here. I'm just a bit of a mouthpiece, and I'll explain that in a minute. So what we're talking about
I want
is-
to state your name for the record, though, please.
I'm sorry?
State your name for the record, please.
Peter Lyon,
Thank you.
Don Weston and Peter Lyon.
Thank you.
And the reason I'm involved, to give you some continuity, is that when Mike Quigley and family owned the property, I was the one that came before you to ask and receive approval for development of the lot. And it's in your records, and if you have any questions on that, I'm more than glad to bridge on that. Mike is a very proud Vietnam vet. The last thing he wanted to do was come in a public hearing, and so I filled it in as a friend.
Okay.
So I'm providing continuity, and Don's also a good friend. All right. So the first thing we're here to do is to ask you to consider putting back in on section 9 the conditional use for storage. It was in there when we first came before you, if you look back at the records, and I'll give you copies of it. So. So historical document.
Thank you.
Think I'm in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
I give you mine. Okay.
You have a spare? I can make copies if you
No,
don't
it's
have
okay.
enough.
I don't need mine, so
Okay.
give it to your research.
Do you see it on?
So, and if you look at that and what you approved, that is what you approved. It was a commercial / storage type approval. And it was kind of neat. It was set up really pretty well to accomplish the primary goals. Mike and his family did really develop it for different reasons. And Mike and Don are extremely good friends. So there's no realtors, developers, or anything else involved. It's just one friend making a transaction with another friend. And Don is also a multi-generation business, so he is actively moving forward to develop the parcel, which I know the town of Colchester would prefer. So it'll work out good, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So to provide the flexibility we originally had, we'd appreciate you seriously considering putting back in 9 the conditional use for storage. And you can put all the caveats on top of that you like. You know, proper screening, location, et cetera. There's absolutely no problem with that because Don wants it to look as good as you do. And it isn't going to be a dominant use, but it is a use that's usable, very useful in today's environment, as you well know. Okay, so that's the first request. And it's a serious one to us. And the second one is we want to give you just a little sense of showing you that he is moving forward to develop the lot as you would, and we would really like to do it. So I'm going to show you a little profile on that. This is not a site plan review. It's just to give you a precursor of the roadmap that Don is in the middle of following. So when we come back, you'll have the continuity. So I can answer probably any questions you have that got us to this first pass with your first approval, because I did go through that if you look at the records. And B, take you through what we intend to do and where we intend to do it for this final pass. And the neat part is that Don has the equipment and the know-how to do it. And so this works out pretty good. And in line with that, we came back to you guys not a long time ago, but a while ago, says, is there anything important to you that we want to consider? And the one thing we were told was, check and see if the Agency of Transportation wants a sidewalk in there. So we did that, and they said no. You know, with what they're doing on that intersection, they did not want one in there. The second handoff you gave us for a homework assignment, which is very legitimate, was to find out where the agency wants the access to that lot. Because originally, when we were working with you, it was close to the Maple Fields place. And what they want us to do now is move it back to the crest of the hill which is right across from the multi-unit building on the east side of Route 7. And so if you look carefully at the construction that the state is doing, you see granite curbing coming up, and then it stops in the opening, and that's where they want the access to be, just to kind of give you a heads up on the. So we've done, I think we followed through on every homework assignment you've given us. All right? So the second handout is the next steps. And I want to emphasize, we're not looking for an approval tonight. We're just being as open as we can with you to follow through
Thank you.
with our core objectives, which is to put this lot into production. So any questions that you have for us, I'll take you back to what brought us to the meeting, and that was to get back into your regs a conditional use on section 9, a C, not a P, a C. And you can overlay it with as many rules and regulations as you want, because it's got to be good for us as well as it is for you. That's our simple request. Is there anything you think you need to know that we could do for you to enable you, to encourage you to make that happen? You're very lucky because you got a multi-generation family on one end and a multi on the other end. There was one condition in there between the two families. Mike Quigley bought this property to her encouragement of his dad, who has since passed. So Mike and Don have personally made an agreement that he will either name it Quigley's Place after his dad, he'll come before you and call it Quigley's Way. Somewhere along the line, the name Quigley, right, Don? Yes. Is going to show up in there somewhere. That's the only outside the norm requirement that kind of the two families have booked. Other than that, we'll do whatever you want, in effect. Any questions you can think of? By the way, the earlier discussion was very interesting. That state rec is pretty impactful, isn't it?
So I was gonna ask about your parking lots here.
Your original proposal was for mini storage or just for warehouse storage?
Would you say that again?
Your original proposals?
Yes.
They were for warehouse storage, not mini storage?
I got to be really honest with you. The firms that Don's working with are not willing to release their names yet. So, but it would be retail / manufacturing. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yes.
Retail / manufacturing.
Okay.
And we've had Rick Hamlin look at it, and it looks like it's probably a neat fit from your view and from everyone else's view. You will pass judgment on that in the future if all goes well. Stay tuned. Does that answer your question?
No.
Poke as much as you want.
So your original proposal,
The original proposal,
you said was that you started to say it was a storage unit,
no, yes, if you look at the
but
map.
it wasn't a mini storage, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the map, down in the back lower corner is where the storage units were.
Right.
Can you see it? In the front was the two, effectively boxes, were going to be manufacturing or commercial type uses. It was a speculative design that Mike had come up with.
Okay.
All right, to maximize it. And what we did is we put the storage down in the back because it captured value. It just seemed like a good use of space that was backing away from the road.
And back in that time frame, this was permitted. This was not permitted back in the day, though. After this went through a master plan, exit 17. So I was part of that.
Yeah,
I'm sure at one time.
yeah.
And we definitely had a focus on commercial and what we hope the future to bring. And honestly, the idea is to bring a sewer pipe to there. Especially now that we've fixed the intersection.
Yeah.
It'll be definitely more advantageous to have
What
something that can make use of that
okay.
idea, hopefully. And maybe create more jobs in our area, which we definitely need, I think. Unfortunately, I think that's the idea for the master plan.
Okay. The classic term we all use is highest and best use. right? We just brought up on that term. And so when they put the water line up through to Milton, Mike actually paid 20-some odd thousand, good deal now, right? To have a 10-inch line put across the road as part of that project. So it has umpteen amount of water there. And of course, on the backside, next to the Cirque Highway, the Interstate 91, 89, I gotta get the right one.
89.
Anyways, and it has the gas line. So it's got power on one side, so it's got a lot of infrastructure, It's a beautiful lot, as your planners would tell you probably before. It's a beautiful lot.
One of the biggest things that we've had problems with is get zoned for, motels or a lot of other things, but we don't have the sewer capacity there.
Yeah.
So that makes it kind of limited on what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So manufacturing retail combination seems like a perfect fit. Creates jobs, gives you a tax base, blah, blah, blah. It'll be neat to see what you think of it.
Not even a clue as to what the manufacturer is? Just curious.
Any other questions you can think of or suggestions, words of wisdom for Don and us to think about?
Rich?
It looks like there's one right over here.
Well,
Jump right in.
so, I guess I just want to jump in a little bit only because I'm just a little confused. So
Okay.
the request I thought was for mini storage. So that's sort of what the notes were, because mini storage is not permitted in there currently. So the request is to change that. But you're talking tonight a little bit about manufacturing and retail, both of which are permitted in the district already. So
Yes.
you don't need a zoning change.
Well, again, back to
For
the
those
highest and
things.
best use.
Yeah.
So the lot itself has a slight, well, you know the lot. So what it does,
Little
if you
bit.
look at the original
I don't
plan,
go up there too often.
okay, we can take you a tour.
Yeah.
Anyways, on the back, it drops off a little bit.
Yeah.
The main section is beautiful because you can see it from right when you come in from New York or down from Canada, et cetera. But when it dips down a little bit, there's kind of where the existing and pre-proposed were. It's kind of like a little dead space. You probably wouldn't put something that you want visibility or need visibility on. So it's a place like that is a great spot to capture that last little bit of value. Doesn't take any sewer, et cetera. So
Okay.
we're back to just maximizing the use.
So just to be clear, you're already aware that you could do the first part of that with the manufacturing and the retail. Okay, so I'm just trying to get myself up. Maybe everyone else is already on that
No,
page.
far
I'm just
away.
trying to catch up. I'm
No, I'm
sorry.
not on that
No,
page.
no, I have the same
Okay.
question you do.
Any,
Okay, so that is, it sounds like that's sort of a big use of the property, and you're already aware that you can do that, and
Right.
and you may or may not
That's
proceed
right.
with that, and you know that you could probably have approvals for that, because it's
that's right.
allowed/conditional. I think the retail's permitted, and looks like
Yeah,
the manufacturing's conditional,
Your
so,
uses look pretty compatible. It's always
Yeah.
been a well-zoned
yeah.
parcel.
So it's just the
We just
the
made one error.
extra. So just to be clear, the only thing you're talking with the commission about tonight is it indeed mini storage?
Yeah,
as-
putting the C in on section 9.
So let me just show you,
Go to section 9.
yeah,
If my memory's right, am my memory right? Yeah,
section 9. Okay,
There
so
you
where
go.
I've highlighted it here.
you got it.
Okay,
A C in there.
But what happened too, we've been 2.5 years trying to get a building in there or whatever. We've talked to different people, but nothing has happened. And when we came up with this other design, we just got in touch with someone just recently. It was been after we, because otherwise we were going to try to get all storage units, but we were hoping that we can get something else in there. And it looks like, but we don't know yet. We're still dickering, so if we can come up with the right price, we can, we won't need all storage units.
I'm just fact finding. I'm just
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I get it.
That's why you're here tonight? Is
Collecting
the
information.
additional use for the storage, is that?
So it's like you want to go back to this, similar to this plan where you have both
Both, yes.
buildings and mini storage,
Yes,
a combination, where this plan doesn't show any mini storage, okay?
correct.
So for that property, for us to go to, it's not quite so simple as just deciding to go to a conditional use of mini storage, because we would be doing the whole property. So the problem could quite happen quickly is that it could turn into all mini storage up there. And that's not what we envision. That's not what the planning commission envisioned. And I understand that, you're right, it is, without the sewer capacity, it is a problem. So,
That's a totally legitimate, I'm kind of familiar with that process. So the way you would structure and protect the town for the end result you're looking for is just put in there things like site, location, screenage, et cetera, are to be decided and approved by the town. So you can put the overhead in there to locate it where you want, so it doesn't become a dominant feature, if that's what you want to avoid. You know, you could say that a maximum coverage of a certain percent or whatever.
I get that, and I understand for that specific property.
Yeah,
But what happens is, once we pull the trigger on that, it won't be for that specific property. It'll be for all the property, and everything that's in that
it's for that
actual zone.
district.
Exactly.
It's for that.
That would
Yep.
be opening up the doors. I mean, unless the commission's looking into that, but I know you haven't been big on mini storage. Sarita's
Yeah.
made
I
the
just
comment
don't-
before, she'd like to see less of the mini storage world and more of what
Mini.
you first proposed as far as industrial and retail and those sort of, and that's really what that, hopefully one day, that's what that turns into.
That's a very fair point, Rich. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I agree, it's difficult when you own land, and you want trying to find something to build up there.
Yeah.
And
If we had
hopefully-
sewer in
I-
there,
No, it's been forever, and I've been on the board a long time, and it's come up for discussion. But one thing that has now is, I think, is with Exit 16 actually moving forward, I think we will have more commercial people look at Exit 17, and hopefully somebody will want to pull the trigger and seeing about, maybe they even fund it, or find a way of funding a pipe to come in there. I think times have changed. I think the attitude of people have changed. That's what I hope.
it's the one pipe missing.
Yeah, and
Yep,
this
you're
board
right
has
on
been
that.
big on, affordable housing and building housing, but we still need jobs. We still need some
Yeah.
real,
It is a beautiful location.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep, no question. I would encourage you just to think about whether you could allay your concerns by putting the appropriate conditions or stipulations or review points on there that allows the staff to protect you as you need to be protected.
Right.
But it's a legitimate point, totally.
Yep.
You're right, it's district-wide change.
Yep.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate bringing it to us. Twice a year, we look at requests, and that's where we are with this one. What we do is at the end, we make a decision usually. It could be done tonight or not, but we either table it, or we decide we're not gonna be able to move forward on it, or we'll take action to move forward on it. I don't know, I don't wanna waste anybody's time, especially
No problem.
yourselves on this. I personally don't think we should move forward on it, but we have a board here
Yeah.
that also can make a decision on it.
I mean, I thought the staff, just listed out all the stuff we're working on, with the form zoning and everything. And they just thought it was ill-advised, I guess right now, for them to take the time to look at this.
Okay.
So I just want to support that
Sure.
office.
Good. Rebecca, anything, thoughts?
I know that we've revised our regulations over time, and it's evolved. So, and I haven't been here long enough to know the whole history of it.
Sure.
But I know we've designated certain areas where we allow the storage, the mini storage, and everybody was comfortable with that. So I have a hard time justifying it in this area, knowing we still have this issue with the sewer, though. Nothing's getting developed. But, yeah, I still don't think it's the appropriate location.
So just for clarification, is there a line that could eventually, just a line for sewer? Or would it have to be a whole project like what's going on now?
It does, it's like anything else.
What?
It's like anything else. Doesn't have to be. It could be one line pulled right from Milton to a specific area. It
Okay,
could be somebody decides to bring in some type of factory, manufacturing
Yeah.
something,
yeah,
and decide they have enough money and pull that they'd like to bring it in. The town could step up and decide, we'd like to work with Milton
Okay.
again and find out. There's different
yeah.
ways to
It's
do
a big
it.
project, but it's feasible.
It's absolutely feasible. That was the idea 30 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah, and just so you know, too, we will be going to the master plan again, and this idea and others will be brought up on each section as
Okay,
we go through the master plan. So even though we say,
Soon.
if we decide no tonight, I haven't got to Vlad either yet, but when it comes to the master plan, everything goes up for discussion again. Just so you know that.
Are you saying that you could hitch into Milton, or?
I'm saying that was the original idea back in the day. It was possible then, I'm sure it'd be possible in the future, has not happened. We have not had anybody bring it up in the last few years, but that does not mean it can't happen.
Is that something the town would have to work out with the
There
two towns?
could,
or-
it's just like the Malin Space Sewer Project. One day, nobody thought it was going to happen, all of a sudden, all the dominoes fell into place, and it happened.
I
No,
think-
but I'm just thinking, if there was a big, say, a big housing project going in there, which there isn't, but
Right.
if
And-
there was, would they be the one, the developer be the one negotiating with Milton, or would the town be the one? If that was the case,
Yeah,
I don't know.
honestly, that would not be my world. That, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. Yeah.
I think the area is identified for future growth. I think that's pretty understood. It's the timing that is sort of in question. And I think as far as the technological capabilities go, it's my understanding that the Milton line goes all the way to the town line. That there is a sewer line, a public sewer line in Milton that pretty much dead ends right at the town line. And that there is very likely, the technological capacity, but the town has been very thoughtful to make sure that any growth in that area doesn't consume too quickly or overrun some of our other areas targeted for growth too fast. At least that's that's identified in the town plan. So I'm not saying anything that's not known. Our town plan says that we have a growth center, right here in Severn's Corners that's targeted for growth, that we have exit 16 that's targeted for some commercial growth, and that we want to make sure that those areas get the attention that they deserve. But I think that the town, via the select boards, have consistently said that this is an area that will see growth, just not yet. And that time will probably come. It's just a matter of when. And that's going to be up to, the town administrators, select board to decide. But I think that it is technologically possible. It just needs to be done in a thoughtful timeline. But, if you read the town plan, and I think there's even been some public conversations, because there have been people who have asked, even in recent years, whether this will happen. I think if you read those minutes, you'll probably see that the select board has sort of publicly said the same thing that I'm telling you now, that it's a yes, but not yet. So I think certainly you will see that as an area of growth. It's targeted as an area of growth, just not this year. It's just a matter of which year.
Hopefully in my lifetime.
I can't speak to what year. But it's not an area that is meant to be in a rural area forever, or an agricultural area. And it is definitely one, especially commercial growth, especially maybe mixed use, but that there is an intention of having some built environment there. And so I think that's sort of, identified in the plan as being all the more careful not to have too much there that you can't take back, and to make sure that when it's ready, that I think it'll be very, very valuable area. I think it's a fantastic location. And as soon as it's ripe to go, I think, hopefully, for everyone who owns in the area, it'll be a beautiful, brilliant place to have some land.
The beauty you have is that we've done everything you wanted, and you've got a great developer you're working with.
Yeah.
It's local, I mean, your design points, but you don't have any middlemen, so it's kind of cool. You're
Yeah.
willing and dealing with the man right here.
Yeah, that we do appreciate.
So that'll work out good
Yep.
for everyone.
Right. Well,
Any other questions for us or words of wisdom for us as we move forward?
no, I do not. I hope for the best. Hopefully someday that does come, but not today, unfortunately.
All right, well, one last thought. Just
Yep.
think about C being in 9.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Absolutely.
time.
Yep.
You have a good night. All right. Thanks again.
Thanks.
So we have to take some kind of action.
Did
on
you
that?
guys want a recorded action, or
Do we want a recorded action? Do we want to, we don't need a motion on that.
you don't have to, but if you want
We
something,
want it permanent, so we could do a, yeah, we
Reflected
could do
in the
a
minutes?
motion. So we make a motion, we're not doing it, so what's, you have the official word on there?
Well, there's 3 options. We can either review it and for a proposed amendment,
Right. Go down
or
to
we
num-
can table it and
Right.
request for a later time,
Yeah.
which would probably be during the updating the town plan,
Yeah,
or decide not to pursue it at all.
there you go. That's the
Um,
one I vote on.
That's when you vote, you don't want to
That's-
table it until we look at the new town plan?
It'll be, when we get to the town plan, it'll happen anyways.
Well, I know, but that's one of the options, is to table it until we do look at the town plan.
Do we like it? Does that sound
'Cause if
comfortable with you?
If you take 3, decide not to pursue it, then
When we get to
you
the
won't
town,
pursue it.
when we get to the town plan, it's all, everything's gonna be, but I'm okay with that. If,
it's your
I want to make sure
motion.
with Kat, no, I want to make
We're
sure
just
we're
gonna
we're
write
on
it
that,
down.
because I never thought about that one before. So I just want to make sure we're in agreement when we do this, because we do this often. So if we table it, I thought it was to look at it again in the future, of like the coming, when we look at supplements again. But whether we table it or not, when we get to the master plan, every single area, we will nitpick through again.
I do think
But I wanna know what
if you
everybody's-
table it, identifying some timeline is helpful, because sometimes you might table it and say, hey, this is great. 6 months from now, we just don't have the capacity right now, or table it until the town plan, or table it until, so having some, if you do table it, having some idea of timeline is helpful.
Okay.
'Cause
Yeah,
that-
because I don't want the developer
Yeah.
to think that 6 months from now, we're
Right,
going to
yeah.
look.
I
at
do
it.
think C is great if you're like, absolutely not ever,
Right. Even when we look at the town plan.
even, I
But
mean,
we're
I'm sure,
looking at X
maybe you've never
17
gotten those
in the town
requests,
plan
maybe you
anyway.
have you ever gotten one where you're just like, no, just, no,
I don't think we've ever made a motion on one.
yeah,
We've all nodded our heads, but that was it.
yeah.
The last one sounds too final.
Yeah, we were pretty final, but they were all just shaking
Well-
their heads, which I'm okay with tabling it to the future of the master plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we can do. I mean, that's what
Okay.
we've kind of said we're going to
Exactly.
be looking at.
That's a question.
Yeah,
Something else qualifies there.
yeah. No, I'm on board.
The
You wanna
only,
make
the
a mo-
only question I have, just as, Ivan, mic's not on. The only question I had, sorry, that's why I couldn't interject. Is a functionality of C that, you could look back when you're, it's been a year and you're, in a different mental state maybe than 8:26 PM on this exact night. And you're like, oh, we really had strong feelings that night about this. You could look back on it differently than saying, well, oh, we gave ourselves homework for the future to make that decision at that time. So you've kind of got, I think you're right that you'll look back at this no matter what when you look at the town plan, but how you record your feelings towards this request tonight could
Oh,
guide
we're
you.
recording our feelings now, okay.
It's a little hard.
Well, the difference,
That's way too much for me now. He's a lot younger than me on this one.
The difference to B and C to me, so I'll tell you, the difference to B and C to me is if you guys are like, mini storage is never gonna be a good fit for this area. I don't think kicking the can down the road to a town plan or not is gonna help. But if you're like, maybe the idea of putting it in some sort of like mixed use, commercial PUD may work with some, let's kick it down, maybe we'll talk about it later, then that's B. But if you're like, no, not ever, it's just not our, even close to highest and best use, then I think C is where you need to go. But that's up to you in figuring out if you have some strong feelings about this or not.
Slide wasn't here at the beginning of this.
I'm hearing it's not A.
Okay, my
Didn't get
question is,
Yeah.
he came specifically and said that he was looking for conditional use for storage, but then he was speaking about, I guess I'm just.
Well, because he wants to put both on there. He wants to put retail, manufacturing, and
Yes.
mini storage. And right now, he can't put mini storage on it because it's not allowed.
And that's what he was looking for.
So that's where he was looking for
It's
conditional
like
use.
a Band-Aid to use the land until this manufacturing thing.
Exactly.
happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we allow mini storage on his lot, it's going to be for the whole district.
And that will change everything.
So that was the request, and that's what we're voting on.
Exactly.
Okay, I go with C.
Okay, there you go. Because the only thing that
And I can scroll back up to the map for you.
you all
so-
just built in Williston Road, it is a massive complex.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's massive. Yeah, in Williston Road, U-Haul complex.
Which one?
U-Haul's
U-Haul.
new complex in
Oh, yeah,
Williston.
that's pretty big.
That's pretty big. That is
Yeah, you could have
huge.
that everywhere if you,
Yeah, and I still don't see that provides what we want up there.
So the question is, do you see yourself changing your mind on that later?
On the storage?
Yes.
No.
I do not.
No.
Don't really change my mind, but nothing is being really developed there.
I think to look at every parcel.
Because you don't
individually,
have
just to
sewer.
kind of get
That's
an
what,
idea. You know
that's
what I mean?
what'll happen when we get into
Yeah,
the
fair
master
No, I
plan.
understand that, but having it like as a secondary, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
option for like vacant land, provided you have like a, commercial use primary, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Go back to your options.
Yeah.
B,
Well, B will give you another
Okay,
bite.
you
of-
want-
It's not A. I think I'm
That's
hearing
not
it's not
A.
A, so.
So we could, but that would give the option, I guess. Even if we don't like it, they can be relooked at. We're gonna relook at it again at the master plan.
And C doesn't close a door. I mean, you guys
It
can
doesn't.
always do whatever you want to do. You're your
Yeah.
own board.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not like, oh, we made this decision, our hands are tied, we could never.
Right.
That's not what it means. I think it just means that you're sort of saying like, hey, the chances are pretty slim.
What do you think? We'll do amendment?
You need a
I don't
minute.
think I'll ever want mini storage up there, but I would go with B if that's
You would
what
go.
the commission wants.
Yeah.
What do you
You're
think?
straw polling right now?
All right, so we got a straw vote.
Somebody's gotta
Rebecca
make-
gets B.
Straw poll, then
I don't necessarily want these. It's
That's all right.
Just seeing where we're
Because
going
we-
here.
We still don't have to pursue it with D, right? It's not-
Yeah, we're
it's
not
a
still,
yes.
yeah, it's not a yes.
No,
But we
no,
would
I
put a
think
timeline on it saying
B
that,
only becomes an issue, I think, when, if you leave somebody sort of like unsure that they might come back next month or the next 6 months, and ask again. That's the only time I think B really becomes an issue, is if they've sort of got false hope,
Oh.
okay.
which,
So if I move that we table this request until we update the town plan and review it at that time, would that do it?
it sounds like a real motion.
I like that one. I second that.
All right, all discussion, we've discussed, all in favor?
Aye.
No, no, no.
Nope.
I'm just saying aye.
Okay,
I'm
all right.
voting.
You are saying aye? Okay.
All right,
Okay, great.
motion passes, there we go.
Did you get all that okay?
That was a
I-
good exercise, because I think
didn't
that is the
totally
first time we've done that.
Okay, so
I
I,
didn't know if that
It
was
really
the
is.
motion.
All
I think
right.
I heard Rebecca say, so we just want to make sure we get it,
Okay.
that she, Do you want to repeat it?
Oh, God, you want me to repeat it?
That's right there.
Yeah.
I don't want to put
Okay,
words
that
in your
we,
mouth.
Table the request
Mhm.
until we update and review the town plan.
And it was unanimous. I think I heard a Wendy second.
Yep.
And we know that's going to come up in the next year or two, right?
That's
We're going to be digging in on this sooner than you think.
Yeah.
We just did it and crossed that one.
All right, so I think we're good. Let's go to this affordable
right.
housing update.
Yeah, so, affordable housing update, but as part of this, I just want to give you guys some other updates on just housing in general. And some things that are coming down the pipeline. So, let's talk housing, and a quick update to this since even I wrote this. So last night,
Conversation, sure.
I participated in the biannual housing convening meeting that the CCRPC puts on, that just sort of gets housing groups together twice a year, to sort of just give updates on sort of the housing targets, housing affordability. Each one seems to be a little bit different. Sometimes it's housing partners from nonprofits, sometimes it's municipalities, sometimes it's housing commissions from some towns. This one seemed to be a little more staff heavy than in some of the past. I think the last one that I went to, I think I was the only staff person there. Yeah, I think I was the only planner in the room. But it was really well represented by quite a few nonprofit groups, but that weren't even housing. They were sort of housing related, housing adjacent. So some things to just know about housing things going on in the region. The big one to know about are these housing targets, and I don't remember if I've talked to you guys about these yet, but I want to preview it to you because at some point it's going to be coming to you probably right there at that table. The state, in one of its recent legislation, maybe 2023, I don't think it was this year's, I think it was last year's, made a bunch of work for the regional planning commissions. And part of it is that there are these housing targets that are to be created statewide that will come up with one big number. It says, these are the housing units we need to have come online at various checkpoints across the state. And the first step is to figure out how much of that goes to each region. I believe the regions are going to be defined by the Regional Planning Commission regions. And then those regional planning commissions have to then take that target, whatever they're assigned. These numbers are not, I don't believe they're known yet. At least last I checked, they were not known. They then have to take the number that they get, so our region, our CCRPC, has to take that number, their share, which will be the biggest share, and they then have to parse it out to all of their member towns and say, Burlington, you get this. Williston, you get this. Colchester, you get this. And they have been working for the better part of the last year, 9 months or so, to come up with a methodology for doing that, to figure out how to say, let's just say they get 100,000 units. I'm making up numbers. Please don't freak out at home. If they get 100,000 units, how do they figure out who gets what among those 100,000 units? And they had a lot of proposals for how to do that. And there were a lot of, they called them lenses, and they had a small working group put together to help them figure out how to do that. Zach was there and thankfully raised Colchester's hand and said, hey, we want to be part of this small working group because we're going to be impacted. So he and I have participated off and on, tag teamed, gone together to some, to help come up with what we hope is a fair methodology. We didn't necessarily get to decide on the final product, but at least we played along as we went. So there is a methodology that will then take that master number and say, hey, Colchester, here's your number. Some of the things that we brought to them as we were going through this is to say, hey, don't just look at population. That's not a fair number, because we also have, as you saw tonight, we talked about it a lot, wastewater constraints. You can't just say, here's your number, Colchester, figure out where to put it. Because even if we wanted to put it there, we can't put it there because the stuff has to go somewhere. We talked about resource constraints. We talked about existing zoning. It's a very easy thing to do to just say, hey, we'll look at our existing zoning, and if it's R4, that means you can put 4 units an acre there. Nope, can't do that either. So we had a lot of these hard conversations. The next step in this is that the RPC staff is going to be meeting with every planning commission. They say the fall. We're in the fall, but we don't have a date yet.
This fall?
This fall.
Okay.
It's on their timeline. I don't have a date though.
October, right?
It's October. I know. I know.
Might have a few days.
It could be February. I don't know. I have not yet received a date. But I'm giving you the preview while I'm sitting here to tell you that at some point, they will be meeting with every regional planning commission to deliver either the number or the methodology, or both, and talk through it. The other thing that will be coming, and again, I haven't seen these numbers yet, just to be clear, and I'll be working pretty close. I'm very invested in this, is that is also going to be dependent on our future land use map. So the region also has a future land use map.
Future what?
What we call a future land use
Oh,
map.
land use.
I don't know the process that went into it when it was first created as part of the ECOS plan in 2009. Does that sound, do you know?
Not sure. I wasn't in Vermont in 2009. So
Were you
I
born?
apologize.
I think it might have, if somebody from RPC is watching, don't hold me to it. But maybe it was later than that, 13? I could be off by a multitude of 4 or 5, I don't know, whole college years. So the original ECOS plan created, I think, a future land use map, which looked at every town in the region and said, here's where future land use is. That future land use map is a key component of how they're coming up with these targets. Great, except our future land use map has big problems. One of the biggest that we noticed is that a big area of future growth is Camp Johnson. Pretty sure we're not going to be putting any new units on there. So there's a lot of steps that have to happen. I don't know if the RPC will be doing it, if we have to do it, if we as a group will do it. So I'm just sort of putting this all out there to let you know that there's probably a lot of work coming this fall and winter. I will be doing as much as I can on the staff side, but where there is anything that has to do with any policy, we're going to all be doing it together. There's a timeline that I believe was presented to the select board when the RPC, when Charlie Baker presented. I think it was very fall heavy. You can see it if you want to look through the select board packet from, is that your last meeting? I'm sorry, I hate putting you on the spot, Pam. I never like to do it, but so there was a timeline, I believe, that was presented. I think I'm giving slightly more details than Charlie presented, but I think it's the same general gist. I think it's gonna, I mean, like all things, gonna go longer later and not meet the deadlines that they think they'll meet.
We've got 2 meetings
Yeah.
left.
Yeah. And I have not been, I don't know when these will happen. And there's a lot of towns in Chittenden County and only so many staff members at the RPC. So, and I don't think it'll happen in one meeting. I think these are big issues and they're big consequences. So I'll just keep you guys in the loop, but this is kind of a big thing. When we talk about, so some of the questions, I watched the select board meeting and I know that some of the questions that had come up then is like, so what about these targets? There are consequences if we don't meet them. And the answer that has been shared is no. You know, there's no grant funding that's tied to it. There's no hand slapping. You know, but the danger anytime you set targets is that when you don't meet them, you don't meet them. None of the targets, I believe, in the ECOS plan from the last time have been met. And nobody ever says that with a smile on their face. And when you set aggressive targets, that's a risk that you take. And I've shared that concern. But we'll see. There may be some towns that worry that their targets are too low because they want housing, and if you have a target that gets met too early and then you still have housing that comes, the NIMBY people will say, hey, we met it, stop. So there's a lot of people that have a variety of concerns. So a lot of people are really invested in this. We'll see what happens. We'll sit down together at some point, so this is what's going to come. So that's the big thing together with housing. These are just units. Those are not affordable units. As far as I know, there may be some further percentages that come out of that get further developed, but at this point, I haven't heard any information about those units being assigned. The philosophy at this point is that housing stock leads to housing affordability. Because naturally, when there's more stock available, you know, Econ 101, that will bring down, especially that middle income housing. So I don't think there's as much emphasis.
This was really helpful. Thank you for putting this together, because, again, it's, you know, just helpful to know that I feel like Colchester is meeting, you know, kind of for the region, you know, for Chittenden County, we're doing our part.
I think
So-
sorry to interrupt you. So that's one big update. The other big update I wanted to give you, so just last week, I traveled down to Montpelier with Kathy O'Reilly, who's our Economic Development Director. So the town has a designated growth center from 2009. Every 10 years that needs reapproval. Every 5 years we need to do a check-in. Well, we used to. After this year's legislation, we won't have to anymore, so it was our last check-in. So we had to do a check-in with the Downtown Development Board, now known as the Community Investment Board. So we met with them, and some of the numbers that I put in here for you came from that report. And I'm going to be giving the full report to the Select Board probably in the next meeting or two, and I'll share that with you guys when I have it ready. But really just some interesting statistics that had come out of like seeing what's happening with our growth center. So I put some of those in here, the chart that's in here, just because I learned a lot just from pulling those numbers together. Zach helped a lot with that, about where our housing is going. So that's in here. Actually, I'm going to jump down to that real quick, just to sort of talk about that before I jump into the affordable part of this. So the growth center stuff, and what's interesting, and there's some asterisks in here, some of the units in the growth center were built before the designation. So the very first building, maybe two, were built in the southwest quadrant prior to the designation. So they don't even count here. So we may even be ahead of our percentage.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So the growth center's targets are to hit 50% of your housing in the growth center. I don't know what other towns are hitting. The fact that we got 46 actually surprised me. I feel like that's a lot considering how big our geography is. And considering that we weren't counting some of those units, and we're not counting the 600 that are currently in the permitting process right now, roughly 600. So those are pretty impressive numbers to me. The other thing we talked about with the board while we were down there, because they were like, well, what's going on with your commercial? You're not doing so hot. But, you know, we really had a bit of a reality check with them that I think they appreciated. And that's that, you know, having the mixed uses are critical and they're helpful. But when you're just looking at square footage, and you're looking at this walkable mixed use community that you're building, square footage is a terrible target, because to get that square footage, you're talking about Costco type things. You're talking about large footprint buildings, and those are not what you want in a growth center. And so I politely as I could told them that square footage is not a good number to measure, and that you don't want 50% of your square footage of commercial in your growth center. Because the only way to achieve that is to have really large square footprint buildings. And that's just not what you want. And they were really great and gracious about it, and I think they understood it. So we're nowhere near our 50% there, and I think that's okay. And I think they were okay with that too. So that was that. I think it went really well. Had some good questions from them. They gave us a great big thumbs up. Everybody liked it. We got a unanimous vote, except for one person who abstained. I'm thinking there's just some history there. But.
What did you vote on, though?
Huh?
What did you vote on?
They voted to, I just got the minutes. The vote was to, Zach's gonna look it up. It was bizarre because there was no approval. It was just a check-in. It was like word salad. It was.
It's really a mystery for the abstaining, you don't know what the question was.
Maybe that's why they abstained, they couldn't figure it out, I don't know.
No, I'm thinking it was another reason.
How many people are on this committee?
What was the vote? Do you have it?
The vote was approve the staff recommended motion that the Colchester Growth Center continues to meet the standards for designation in effect at the time it was originally designated.
So we continue to meet our standards.
So you got a gold star. Good
We got a
job.
gold star.
Very good.
Yes.
How many-
How many people? I think there's like 17 or 18. They're really appointments that fill. We even got a vote from Sarah Had, who is on the committee. She is the VLCT representative. She did say she's more than 3 years removed, and so her AICP Code of Ethics lets her vote in favor of her old town. So we appreciated it.
Very good.
So Sarah gave us a positive vote. She was not an abstention. So that was that. That was great. I'm going to move back up here unless anybody had any questions on that. We don't have to go back because of the legislation, because these are going to be transitioning. These designations are going away in 2026. They will cease to exist. And there are these new designations that are like community and neighborhood or something, or core, and I don't even know. And then there's going to be these Act 250 tiers, and there's going to be new stuff. That's a 2025 problem. We're not going to talk about them this year. At some point, we'll have to figure out whether or not the town is going to apply for Tier 1A status. 2025 problem. Yeah, we'll talk about it. A Tier 1A status is an exemption status for Act 250. It's kind of like a lot of the exemptions you get through the Growth Center now. But there is some work that goes into achieving it. And we'll have to, I've got to get a feeling as to whether or not the effort and the reward line up enough to, there's not a lot of benefits to the community. There's a lot of benefits to builders, which I guess translates to benefits to the community. So we've got to really dig into whether or not the effort to get that designation is worth it. But you can't even get it till 2026, so.
Okay, but in us relooking at our
code requirements in the growth center, is that something we need to keep in mind of whether the tier 1 will affect how we approach it?
Sort of. The only thing you actually have to do, I think one of the tier 1A requirements is that you have to have a form-based code. But it doesn't really give you much more detail than that. It doesn't have to be good, bad, detailed. You just have to have one. I think you have to have historic preservation too, maybe. So there might be some other things if we decide to go for it.
Historic there, though.
Precisely. So we
Yeah.
just have to have it anyway.
History's short, 10 years.
Well, there's that one house, right?
Yep, one left.
Yeah, you need to have certain resource protection standards. So there's some things, there's a lot there's a lot of checklists. So we'll figure out, I don't know yet, if Colchester will apply. But it does get you quite a few Act 250 exemptions.
That's a lot of money there, so that's probably good
Yeah,
to attract developers.
but we may be fully built and exempt by then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. So our gross center designation will go away. It is in place till 2026, but it'll be called something different at some point. Okay, let's go scoot around. I'm bouncing here. So let's get into this other work. So those of you who were around in 2021, I did a similar presentation on this in fall of 2021 or December of 2021. So we have a consultant, Stephen Falble, who is a Vermont guy, who helped us collect a lot of information, sort of take a different approach to data analysis for affordability, which is a really unique lens in looking at this in comparing towns. So this is sort of an update to that we did in 2021. A lot has changed. If anybody's been following the market, even since 2021, things have gone even crazier. I do have a presentation I'm going to show you here, and then I'll come back to some of the other stuff. Bear with me. I put my glasses on. Okay. So, housing affordability. So there's been a lot of town reports on this, a lot of regional reports. I'm just going to go through some of this quickly, because some of it I've already talked about. So there's so much data you can use when you're looking at affordability. Census data is always helpful, but the limitation of census data is it doesn't necessarily dig down to town level. It's very difficult when you're in towns like in Vermont, because our towns are too small to be their own census tract. So what Mr. Falbo's done that's very helpful is he's able to pull our grand list data, which gives us very specific information. And so that's really helpful here. And when we're looking at affordability, we're looking at ownership and renters. So the two levels. Something to keep in mind when we talk about affordability, and this is critical, is that affordability is a relative measure. It's almost always a relative measure. There's a lot of numbers that come in and out. But when you're talking about affordability, you're talking about the relative connection between what somebody earns and what their costs are. And so when you're talking about housing affordability, you're looking at how much they earn and how much their housing costs are. And HUD and most housing organizations generally say you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on your housing costs. And sometimes some people say it's just your housing costs. Some people will include your utilities in that. But generally, 30% of your income. And so that's a general number, but that does become relative. So somebody says, what's an affordable house in Chittenden County? I can't just say it's $300,000, because $300,000 might be affordable to somebody, not affordable to somebody else. So as I start to get into the rest of these numbers, please know that we had to pick some numbers in order to have a baseline. So, as I show you here, if I say affordable is $1,500, you'd be like, that's not affordable, that's like free, because that's unheard of. Please know we had to pick some numbers, and those numbers, what we're trying to do is have a baseline that we can compare town to town to town to town, and year to year to year, and those are the numbers that we're going with. I know that $1,500 right now seems unheard of, and very affordable at $1,000. If you know anyone who's renting, that almost seems like a silver unicorn, right? I know. So please take it with just a bit of grain of salt, and same thing with ownership. $350,000 for a purchase price for affordable, and $250,000 for very affordable. Again, we had to have some numbers. When we did this in 2021, we were about $50,000 less. We looked at $250 for the purchase and $200 for very affordable for purchase. So this just gives us a baseline, even though you could argue that those numbers are somewhat arbitrary. Okay. So, grand list data. So how do we compare town to town to town? So here's the problem when you compare grand lists between towns. The CLA and the grand lists, CLAs make my head hurt. But what we know about grand lists is that some grand lists reflect closer to accurate lists of what housing is valued at, and some are really far off. Colchester's is currently pretty far off because we haven't had a reappraisal in, anyone know? A long time. It's been a long time. And so some other towns have also been off. So when we use the CLA, we have to adjust it, okay? I'm gonna go through this quick because you guys probably don't care about all the math. Makes my head hurt, probably makes your head hurt too. Maybe you love it. You can look at it later if you love it.
7.3%.
So there's my mouse. So Colchester has the lowest number on here for CLA. That's why, happy, gonna be looking at a reappraisal soon, guys.
Oh my God.
Just the planner, not the tax appraiser. But that's why, because when you get to a certain number, you have to do it by state law, okay? So the takeaway for you guys is that when you're looking at a grand list and you're pulling a number, a house on Colchester's grand list that says 250,000 might actually be different. So that's why these are adjusted to sort of reflect and sort of normalize them all. So in Winooski,
is the,
Winooski's the level. They just did one apparently. So theirs is probably pretty close to accurate, having just done it. Williston, Shelburne also pretty far off. And so these are normalized so that we can compare town to town to town. Just to put that data out there. Moving on. This is good information, so let's not go too fast. So how many units do we have in all of these towns? Not surprisingly, Burlington has a lot of apartments, excluding apartments, units. They are the state's largest community. Essex pretty big. I don't know why in this one we excluded apartments. The other thing is that when you talk about grand lists, things are categorized weird for state tax purposes. And we've made an attempt to normalize that as well. So for tax purposes, there's these things called commercial apartments. If you have like 10 apartments in a building, that's not considered a residence for tax purposes. It's a commercial building. So it gets complicated when you try and get the numbers, and so it requires you to look at the grand list. The other thing that we had to do, Mr. Fauble had to do, he gets all the credit for this, but we identified as an issue was that when you look at the grand list and you see a building let's pretend that Sarita owns a building with 10 units in it. That building is going to show up as one building, maybe worth $3 million. Well, that's not affordable. That's so far from affordable. But when you consider that it may have 10 units in it and you divide those out, all of a sudden that value changes. So that's another critical step, that we can't just look at those larger buildings and their value in the grand list. And so a lot of work had to be done to break that down. So more steps there. So just know that we knew that, took care of that. And so that produced this here. So again, these are our homes. And again, these are normalized here. And then the percent of affordable by town. And there we go.
And this was done in what year?
These were, this was grand list, so I think it was the 20, I had it on a different slide. This was the 22 to 23 grand list, I believe. So probably even will vary when the next one comes out. So, I don't know, any surprises there for anyone?
I think Winooski's changing, just the real estate values alone.
Yeah.
It's gone up in Winooski, so that's why I was asking what year this was.
Ah,
Winooski's jumped dramatically.
has it?
Oh, yeah, I have some friends that are selling their house right now, and I couldn't believe what it was appraised out.
Huh?
I don't know why. Just close to Burlington, I
I
guess.
think so, yeah.
They like-
They're pushing people that need affordable housing out.
Yeah.
Oh. Interesting.
People can't afford Winooski anymore. They can't find
I
rental.
was mostly surprised at the sheer, not the relative ranking, but the number, like 80 to 30 is like a huge range. I think that's what sort of surprised me.
Well, Shelburne, I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm not
either.
surprised that Shelburne fell where it did, just how different.
Just see Stowe.
Yeah.
Stowe must be 2%. So what is is there a ballpark goal for, you could say, okay, so we have 50% of our housing stock is affordable, that's good. That's, that's a goal, that's what we're shooting for.
You know, it's funny, because when everyone talks at the regional levels and stuff, they're always talking numbers, not necessarily percentages. They're always new units and targets for new units. And so that's partially what prompted us to look at this, because we felt like a lot of the studies and the targets weren't looking at existing stock, and it's critical to keep in mind existing stock, preserving existing stock. And not missing that. And it's definitely important to bring on a certain number of new units. But let's also look at what our baseline is. And everybody's baseline. So, as you saw in that other one, here's where we fall. This is the same numbers, just put into nice form. The affordable and very affordable sort of track pretty similarly. Most of Colchester's very affordable units are manufactured homes. We have a lot. We have over 500. And that was sort of shocking to me when I first started here, until I really started thinking about it. They're just, sort of scattered. We have, 6 parks, I think.
And where Gail lives.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe 6. 2 up on Roosevelt Highway. What's that?
What's that Woods place that's off Route 2A? Is that, it's a pretty big, no, that's one I can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
Westbury.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
big.
And then there's one by St. Mike's that a lot of people don't think about because it's not over the town line.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a few. So that's where most of those are. I mean, 634. It's a lot of units.
That is.
And many of them are protected by a host of state and federal laws, state and federal funding. So hopefully, we've even seen this year, some FEMA trailers that didn't get used after the flooding. The state donated them to some of the parks and replaced some aging homes. So I don't think we're losing any that I'm aware of.
Well, it seems like that one off 2A on the west side, some of those units have been disappearing. They've been thinned out.
The Westbury
I
Or-
don't know.
The one
that's
near-
on the west side.
near
if
Essex?
you're going north. It's one of the older ones. It's,
Breezy Acres on Route 2.
Oh,
it is on Route 2. I don't know. There's one on either side of the road.
okay,
It's just the one on the left as you're going north.
okay.
Some of the units have disappeared, so it's kind of thinned out. So,
They bought
Oh,
out. They own
but they
more.
disappear.
Yeah.
So there's nothing taking its place on the lot.
interesting. Yeah, those recently became a co-op in the last 2 years. They were owned by a private person, and they bought themselves out, and they're now a co-op. But I'm guessing they'll be replaced because,
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I was just, every time I drove, I'm like, well, that's
huh,
different.
I hadn't noticed, but we have our mobile home parks have some of the loosest regulations. It's pretty easy to replace them, pretty short setbacks. The DRB actually just approved a variance for one of the mobile home parks, and and it was sort of staff supported, which we almost never support a variance, because we know that replacing mobile homes, especially when the sizes have changed over
Yeah.
the decades, they're not the same size they used to be. So we're doing, I think, what we can to support them in their replacement. So I don't see anything that would stop them, except for maybe insurance and financing. But they get good support. Okie dokie. I think we just did that one. What do we got here? We got more data. This is actual cost. There's the value of your median home in each of these towns. This is
Old.
this is the
Yeah, old.
normalized for the CLA. So this is, yeah, so this is not what things are selling for, keep in mind.
Oh,
This is
taxed.
the assessed value. And because it's been so long since an appraisal, not assessed value, the appraised value, this is reflecting what's on those appraisal cards, what's in the grand list. Which I find fascinating because, let's not forget, if you go back to that CLA chart, Williston and Shelburne were not that far off from Colchester in the CLA. And yet the home price is drastically different.
Yeah.
I only noticed that because I'm benefiting from that really low CLA in Williston. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
A couple more slides, almost done. So what's the difference between grand list and census? I sort of talked about this a little bit. So grand list findings, when we're digging into that data a little bit more, some of the more nuanced data, we see even more affordability. Fewer owner-occupied units. Again, remember the census uses sample data that they extrapolate, so it's never going to be as accurate. Census shows a higher percentage of renters, which I found fascinating because it's often very difficult for the census to get renters to respond to those forms, and usually renters are underrepresented. So I thought that was interesting. Housing stock. So what do we got in Colchester? Curious? Now you can know. Total units, according to the census. So we were not that far off in the grand list and census. So we got roughly almost, so we're approaching 7,000 units in Colchester. So that puts us ahead of quite a few towns. Interesting, we're still combining Essex. I think that we probably will be for a while. Percent rental apartments. So, you know, we're running about 30% of our units in rentals here. Interesting to see, but not surprising, that places like Burlington are running higher. I was a little surprised to see that a place like Essex runs a lot lower. I don't think of us as that much different in our makeup. Same thing with South Burlington. That surprised me too. At least for me. We do have a really high percentage of manufactured homes. As you can see, 11% of our housing stock. That's a lot.
And I know people who want to move to these mobile home communities, and that a lot of retirees, that's what they're doing. They
Yeah.
sell their home and,
You mean someplace warmer than here though, right?
no, I mean.
No, in Colchester?
In Colchester,
Oh.
I mean, the one that's on, I guess, Severance Road going to Essex,
Westbury. Yep.
Westbury, that's very popular. People,
Yeah,
you know,
they have the
when they
biggest
come on the
lots.
market, they disappear quickly.
They do, they do. They're very mature landscaping.
Yeah, very popular.
It's very popular. So, interesting. Okay. So remember what I said at the beginning about affordability being a percent and being relative? So here's that number. So what percent of income is spent on housing? So this is that base number of like just on housing, not utilities and stuff. It would be almost impossible for us to get that data. So you can see those numbers. So just on the housing costs based on the median income. And part of this, you know, there's two things that go into these numbers, of course. What are our costs and what are our income? So, you know, Colchester's income is higher than a lot of communities. And our housing costs trend a little lower, and so that is sort of what creates this percentage of under 30, which many other communities are not hitting. That doesn't mean that everybody's hitting 30%. Certainly many are not, and some people may be well under it.
Gleaned from the grand list?
No, I'm sure that's from the census.
Yeah, can't be.
Definitely from the census.
I've never, I like filled out census, but did they ever ask for that? Or did they just get that from the IRS? Is there like multiple sources? I'm just curious where they come up with the numbers.
I think that's on short and long form. No?
I thought it might only be short form.
Is it short form?
I thought it was only the ACS.
Yeah.
Whereas your census, you know, the decennial census, my understanding is that's demographic information. I could be wrong.
Whatever he says.
I think you're right. Actually,
I'll
worked
look it
the
up.
census in 2000.
You worked for it?
Yeah,
Oh,
It was
did you go
fun.
door to door?
yeah. Still alive.
So household income is something,
It was an issue.
I know.
it's something that I think they collect yearly, so, or ACS is the new term. I say new. I'm dating myself. Newer,
2005.
So,
after I graduated. So I call it new because I didn't learn about it in school.
Yes. So, decennial census did at one point ask demographic information, but when then the American Community Survey started asking those questions, it was reduced to not include that question.
And ACS is yearly for 3 years.
For
Rolling?
us, it's 5 years. We are not large enough.
5, 3 for Burlington?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. So there we are. There's our income. It does trend higher.
Milton one is throwing out.
Yeah, it's throwing us.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't put it together. I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
2 more slides. This is just summarized what I said there. So income, this is just sort of a breakdown of where those income levels fall. Among homeowners. I will share this out for anyone who wants to spend more time on this. So conclusions, you can read all this, but I basically said it all already. So what are your takeaways? The takeaways, it's, we do have a decent housing stock to start with. Affordable is relative. That should always be your takeaway. Nobody should ever go around saying this is an unaffordable place to live. That's almost an impossible thing to say about any place right now. And so when we talk about it, we do have to really put emphasis on what affordable means. But we do have a good supply to start with. There's always work to be done. Can't discount that. How are we comparing income levels? Colchester is, some people will call it a bedroom community, some people will not. Still think it's pretty close to a lot of things. Very commutable. I don't know, I'd be curious to see what all of this looked like before COVID without commuting. And if that has changed anything, I don't have that data. The rental units, smaller, but let's not forget that there are whole large areas that sometimes people forget, even I forget, oh yeah, we've got the Winchester Place over near the fort. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Colchester. It just seems so far away because you have to go through a whole other town to get there. You cannot get there without going through another town from here, from this office.
Used to, when you could go through the fort. Can't do that anymore.
Never in my time here. I didn't know you could do that.
I can't do it anymore.
Ah.
Not since
And there's quite a few, apartments over there. And so, I think those are included in here, and I believe that 100% of those are perpetually affordable. So while not all of them have been built in the last 5 or 10 years, with our limited wastewater capacity, we don't have those large lots to continue to build on, but there we go. That's what we got. That's that. That's where we are. Any questions? I'm always happy to talk about housing and affordability and,
We should start the meeting with talking about it.
yeah.
We should do it at the start of the meeting.
What's
Next
that?
time, we should do it at the start of the meeting.
I'll never get out of here.
Oh,
True.
It's not an easy nut to crack.
They never talk about taxes on any of this stuff? Property taxes and any of that? Never brought up?
It's part of the affordability. It
Just
should
part
be.
of the... You'd think so.
It's interesting because I had learned a lot from our tax assessor on how the different types of housing are taxed. I had no idea. And actually, maybe I'll check in with him because I think that's a good question. Maybe I'll have him see if he's willing to write a short memo because I think it's an interesting piece of the puzzle. And see if he can summarize it, and I'll share it with you guys. I won't drag him to a meeting, but I learned a lot in just understanding how different types of units are taxed, and how differently they're taxed.
Yeah.
It was really eye-opening for me. And I say that as a strong proponent of, affordable housing. I lived in subsidized housing when I was a kid, and so it was very helpful for me. But it is really eye-opening just to sort of see what
Well, when you go through the reappraisal, it's supposed to be,
what impact it has.
balanced. So
What's that?
it's supposed to be fairly balanced, except for the extremes.
Yeah, I don't know how it affects appraisals either. That I don't know at all.
Yeah.
I should learn about that too. I don't know what that does. But I think there's different tiers. Like some things are taxed at a certain percentage and some things are not taxed at all. And
Yeah.
yeah. I'll see if I can get him to write it down. I think it's worth sharing. I think a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts, directions? All right, well, we'll see where we go with the next few meetings. Reminder, we do not meet on election night.
It's Wednesday.
We're going to meet on Wednesday, the day after, which may still feel like election night, but not locally.
Crazy world. Okay.
So we know, we'll move on. I guess we're good.
And then I
Good.
move to approve the minutes from the last meeting on September 3rd, 2024.
Any second? Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that one.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting 9:24. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For open, please.
Oh, well, yes, of course you can.
I almost brought you a pen.
Can't read what I write anymore anyway, so.
I've been playing around with content